hard-won facts.
Yeah.
Right,
lessons.
and in addressing linguist fears, maybe Kelly, you could say something about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because again, I know a lot about what the translation side does, but I have admittedly have a lot more experience in interpretation, and I think the crossover here is this idea around, again, our clients not understanding exactly what we do when we're interpreting or translating, and that they really do kind of figure that we're just these machines, that we hear something and we can spit it out in the other language, and that it's pretty easy and pretty automatic, and that it doesn't take much education. And it's amazing to me how all of these conclusions have been jumped to by our clients, but we have to face the fact that that has happened. And so therefore, interpreting often in a similar way to the machine translation piece gets, our clients often think, well, why should I pay this price for you and your excellence when really, you know, my aunt speaks some Spanish and she could do this, or my, you know, or we will bring the child of this mother into a clinic and the child can interpret for the mother in a clinical setting. So we all know these things. I'm speaking to the choir here, but I think the thing that that we need to look at is it's important to have the confidence and the steadfastness and the clarity of the skill set we have as interpreters and translators, and present to our clients that way, so that they don't think that it's just an expensive way of getting the same job done to pay a professional interpreter versus, you know, again, a 6-year-old child of the mother. We have so many situations, and I think this has a lot to do with kind of respect for and kind of a ethnocentrism, at least in the United States, around English. And if you live here, speak it, know it, and if you don't, figure it out. And so I think there's a piece that comes in there, but I think educating our clients on how important it is to have professionals is like a consistent duty all the time. And one of the things that recently we've been able to do in the courts and the certification groups is that we've been able to come together and say, not only is this something that will have legal ramifications if you don't have a professional doing it, but also because it takes training and education and all of these things to hit this certain level of interpretation, and there are many above that, a certain wage goes along with that. And that's not price setting or anything. It's just, this is what, you know, if you have a professional licensed plumber, you're going to pay a certain level of market, you get what you pay for. And so between anywhere from that to just having like criteria set on how this role is carried out, we see in the language interpreting world as much as you would do in the translation world.
Right.
So
You
Go
wanna
ahead.
go?
Go
Deep
ahead.
breath. No, I just to add to that. I mean, I think part of the problem that we have, particularly here in the U.S., it's not only, you know, somebody going down to the corner to the barista to get something done. It's part of it is that, you know, many of the clients that we're dealing with here in the U.S. don't have a second language themselves, so they don't understand what language acquisition is like, and they say, well, you know, I speak English. I learned, you know, how hard could it be? So they don't understand that. So that education piece is really important. So the flip side of that is because they don't have a second language necessarily, or they don't know what it's like what it is to interpret or to translate or even to learn a second language as an adult. They can't evaluate the product that they're getting. So they don't know that the product that you're giving them is better than the product that you're giving them. And they might say, well, she looks really put together and professional. And this other person here, I mean, like, oh, they can't tell you. They don't know for sure. So that education piece is really, really important. And I think that we do have to consistently and constantly educate. I mean, people will come to you and say, you know, have said to me, and I tell my students this, and I tell, you know, all the professionals that I know, don't let somebody tell you what your value is. You tell them what your value is.
Yes,
And
exactly.
somebody will come to you and say, well, you're too expensive. No, I'm not too expensive. You can't afford me. I understand that you can't afford that, and that's not in your budget. So go to this person, and when you need to have it fixed, come back, and we'll help you.
right. And
So-
it always happens that way.
Exactly, and
Right.
it does. And those are the clients when the ones who come back to
You
you.
keep 'em.
Those are
Those
keepers.
are keepers, yeah.
So I would say to you, and I think it really is. It's just the part of like asserting ourselves and like talking to the developers about how they develop tools, and talking to clients about, you may think this, but this is not really. This is what you think you want, but this is what you really want. We're not necessarily very good asserting ourselves and telling people what we're good at, and being clear on, you know, what we know versus what they don't know. Just because they want something doesn't mean they get to have that the way that they want it. They need to understand what the rules of the game are and what the standards are. So I would just say to you, like, you know, this is your career. It's an important, it's your life. I mean, if you're anything like us, I mean, this is what I eat, sleep, and breathe. So you cannot let your career happen to you. You need to take control of that, and there are going to be people out there who don't want to pay your fees, who don't understand the value of what you're providing and the work that it takes for you to do your job. And that's fine. There's other people that can do work for them. Move on to the other people, because you will find people who value quality and value the skills that you have. It's not going to be everybody.
But every day more, and I think that's a really cool thing.
Well, I think what's important is, one point is that a lot of translators and interpreters, I think, don't recognize their own worth.
Yes.
We think about how much should we charge? Well, how much does she charge? How much does he charge? That's what I'm going to base it off of. You have to think like a business person. You have to think about how much is it worth to your client? How much is your translation going to save their bottom? How much is it going to open up their markets? You know, if you translate this website into French, for instance, how much money are they going to make from France, Belgium, Switzerland, half of Africa, you know, Canada?
What's a dollar value to that?
It's not about, you know, how many cents can I make today? What does this mean to your client? Think about that. That's what you are worth.
Right. And that also, I think, is often the first fear of a young or up-and-coming translator when they graduate from a program, or whether they graduate from a program or not. That's a whole different story that we're going to address later. Is that first step into the translation world. I think all of us experienced translators can help them make that step a successful one. I think we need to extend ourselves and really go into the job fairs, the universities, and help them understand the market that's out there, some of the mechanisms that are out there. So when they come out, they don't, I mean, I had a student come up to me. I had a panel at NYU in New York, and she said, well, I was offered such and such for per page, for 30 pages. It had to be done the next day, and I said yes. And I said, why did you say yes? She said, well, I'm so inexperienced, and I have to make a beginning in this profession. And I said, well, I think you could do it in a different way, because you're not helping yourself, and you're not helping all of us. Because when you start doing those things, you are also undermining the rest of the profession. Whether it's crowdsourcing or doing it for, you know, peanuts, it doesn't matter. But it's not the right approach. So I've started talking to these students, and I think all of us can do that.
I think also in that specific situation, the client doesn't understand that they are paying less than market value for a less than market value product.
Right.
So they think they are paying a reasonable price and getting a crappy product. And suddenly this is their vision, this is their image of translation. It's an relatively expensive thing, and it's never going to be very good.
There you go.
So that's not a good way to start. I understand that mentality. I was there once upon a time myself, but there have to be other ways to break into the profession.
In fact, this is such a great segue. I was thinking about how when I first started in interpreting, it was very hard as a new interpreter, even out of grad school, to come and have any kind of sense of where to start, how to start, what the parameters were, and frankly, the interpreting world was not very welcoming. And I am so grateful that today, and I teach as an adjunct professor at Community College of Aurora, and we have programs of people coming out, and everyone's pulling them forward and saying, connect with this person, do this, do that, here are the standards, don't take less than this, but don't take this job if you're not ready. And we really are helping one another, and that avoids a lot of these things. Because there's plenty of work for good linguists. There's plenty of work. And so, you know, busting that myth of if I tell them my secrets, then they're going to take all my work, I think is a super huge step forward for all of us. And I want to congratulate us all for moving to a next step there.
And I'd just like to support that, because I think, I mean, it's you were saying this is something that we all should do. I would take that a step further and say it's our obligation to mentor people that are coming in and to help them, because I have many students that where I teach at the University of Maryland. I have a lot of of people who are working in the market who are coming back to get a credential. And they are just, I mean, I teach a class, it's essentially translation as a business. And they are so grateful for the information that they receive, because in the field nobody wants to talk to them or tell them anything. And if somebody coming into the market to work can't get help from people that are there, what can they do? How are they going to get work otherwise than to undercut everybody and to try to get in? So it's up to us if we want our profession to be seen as a profession and not as administrative support. It's up to us to make sure that the people that are coming in are qualified and can do the job and are up to the task.
So it's
and they
about
can't
outreach.
do that. Exactly. So they cannot do that if we don't support them. So we really need to do that.
I totally
Yeah,
agree.
yeah.
How many of you have done the ATA school outreach program? Do you know what that is?
How many of you teach?
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's opportunities for all of us. I mean, even you guys. You don't have to be specially trained to go out and speak to kids. The ATA has a program online. I think they have a presentation all set up. It has the content and the presentation. You can go to your kid's middle school or elementary school or what have you and tell them, this is a job you can do. It's a legit thing, and it's very interesting. I did a career fair. Yeah, I did a career fair for 7th graders, and it was wonderful. None of them had ever heard of translation. I showed them an Arabic dictionary, and they were their minds were blown. Half of them didn't know what Arabic was. That was already a step. But
Right, yeah, there you go.
No, I was going to say, there's all kinds of things that you can do in your community. You can go to the high schools, because I spoke at a high school in Pittsburgh the other day, and they were just eating it all up. And Wendy here from Metro State has a program with students who would love to hear from any and all of you probably to talk about what you all do in your careers. So any opportunity that you get to go and talk to people about what the profession is like and let them know that there is a profession. I mean, one of the bigger problems that we have, I think, in the U.S. is that so many of the languages that we need for work that is being consumed in the U.S. are not languages that are taught in school. Right? So there are a lot of students in our schools here, in our high schools, who are heritage speakers of languages that are needed in the community, and they don't necessarily understand that there's a career that they can have with that language. And